In the autumn of her freshman year in high school, Qiaoqi experienced several significant events. Firstly, she became the class monitor. Secondly, her childhood friend, Xiaomingzhi, was admitted to the best university in the city and started picking her up from school at the request of their parents. Thirdly, and most oddly, she received a letter from herself 10 years in the future. The sender of the letter was her 26-year-old self. The weather in early autumn was as bright as if it had never known sorrow. A mottled cement wall divided the rooftop of the teaching building from the corridor into two worlds, one bright and the other dark. Qiaoqi stood at the dark end, listening quietly to the laughter coming from the sunny rooftop. Qiaoqi is gentle? Huh. With such a temper, she's practically a princess. Boys don't think so. Of course not. She always acts pitiful in front of them. The familiar voice was sharp and loud. It belonged to Xiaoru, her best friend since junior high school. Qiaoqi clenched her slender and fair fingers into a fist, crumpling the letter in her palm. If it weren't for this letter, perhaps she would still foolishly believe in this friendship. Friendship, even more absurd than the absurd letter in her hand. Back at her seat, Qiaoqi bit her lip and opened the white envelope once again. To 16-year-old Qiaoqi. From Zhan Xinjia. You probably won't believe it, but I am you at 26. Right now, as I sit under the desk lamp writing this letter, many past events flash before my eyes, and my heart is filled with countless regrets. I wish to make up for the things I should have done and prevent the mistakes I shouldn't have made. So, I wrote this letter, not knowing if the you from 10 years ago would receive it. At 16, Xiaoru was probably my best friend, right? It wasn't until the year of graduation that I accidentally went to the rooftop and heard her slandering me behind my back. But by then, it was already too late. She knew too many of my secrets. The bell for the end of lunch break suddenly rang, startling Qiaoqi, who quickly tucked the letter into her Chinese textbook. Xiaoru walked in with her lunchbox, smiling innocently. She looked like a completely different girl from the one who had spoken ill of her earlier. Qiaoqi lowered her eyelashes, feeling a chill creeping into her heart. You didn't go to the cafeteria again? I brought my lunch. Xiaoru's face showed a hint of awkwardness. I ate in the small garden alone. Alone. She didn't say anything more. Xiaoru blinked, leaned over, and whispered in her ear like a typical best friend. Chi, who was that handsome guy who came to pick you up after school yesterday? He's really good looking. If it weren't for the scene at noon, she might have spilled everything. But at this moment, Qiaoqi just smiled faintly, avoiding her gaze cryptically. Under this slightly eerie gaze, Xiaoru trembled slightly, and as the bell for class rang, she hurried back to her seat. Qiaoqi took the letter out of her pocket and tucked it away. Suddenly, her male desk mate muttered, "Should have done this earlier." Qiaoqi was taken aback. "Jiangxi, what did you say?" Without getting a reply, the boy blushed and quickly buried his head in his own review textbook. In the last oral English class on Friday, a whispered comment made the originally unrelated desk mate suddenly more noticeable. After asking for Qiaoqi's name, the blonde-haired, blue-eyed foreign teacher Dave inquired about her desk mate, then, speaking in a very ordinary Mandarin, exclaimed, "Wow, Qiaoqi, Jiang 11, I get it. Qi means 7, Sui means 11. You two are a pair, 7-11. The whole class burst into laughter. Before Qiaoqi could fully grasp the situation, Jiangxi's face turned red. After school, she pouted and recounted this incident, while a youth bathed in the golden glow of the setting sun supported his bicycle's handlebar, smiling as he reached out to ruffle her hair. She was taken aback. "Xiaomingzhi, what are you doing?" He gently replied, "Chi, you've grown up, and there's a boy who likes you." Not really. Perhaps it's just Jiangxi's facial color corrector malfunctioning. Qiaoqi thought with a hint of sarcasm. Her gaze fell on Xiaomingzhi's delicate face and long eyelashes, sighing softly in her heart. He's the one who's truly grown up. Her childhood sweetheart had become the one that Xiaoru admired. No, not just Xiaoru. When other girls in the class saw him coming to pick her up after school, they couldn't divert their burning gazes. In those glances, she felt both proud and fearful. Qiaoqi and Xiaomingzhi, like Emma and Mr. Knightley in Jane Austen's novels. Over the years, he always lent a helping hand when she needed it most and didn't hesitate to criticize her when she made mistakes. His gaze was always on her, from the past to the future. She couldn't imagine him looking at anyone else. Such outstanding people would always have countless girls looking up to them, and she couldn't control his gaze back, could she? Stepping on the golden glow of the setting sun, Qiaoqi unconsciously groped for the shape of the letter in her pocket. At the end of the letter, the handwriting, identical to hers, wrote, "Until today, what I regret the most is not knowing Xiaoru, a friend who speaks and acts differently, but regretting why I met Xiaomingzhi. The most regrettable thing is meeting Xiaomingzhi, this boy who grew up with her, protected her, and accepted her faults. But why?" In a state of confusion, anticipation, and anxiety, Qiaoqi received the second letter. At 26, she didn't provide answers in the letter, but instead wrote about trivial matters. For example, this time during the mock exam, Qiaoqi had no reason to be nervous because she would, as usual, steadily rank at the top of the class. Because of this, when she received the exam paper handed over by her desk mate on the day of the test, she suddenly had a god's eye view of playing a game with a strategy guide. Probably because her facial expression was too strange, her desk mate inevitably jumped in concern and asked, "Qiaoqi, are you okay?" As he asked, he reached out to her, wanting to check if she had a fever. The girl hesitated for a moment, then instinctively withdrew from the sudden cold sensation on her forehead. Her desk mate realized how presumptuous his actions were, blushed, hastily rummaged in his pencil case, pulled out a ballpoint pen after 3 tries, and jabbed it onto the exam paper without even looking at it. Qiaoqi finally managed to hold back her laughter, lowered her head, and began to work on the questions. For her, who had always been excellent in academics, the exam posed no difficulty, and she smoothly completed the final essay question, choice. In an instant, a phrase flashed through Qiaoqi's mind. Life is a nested structure of trees. Every choice made selects a branch, while another possibility will forever vanish. For example, if Qiaoqi continued writing the essay at this moment, she would complete this exam, but if she chose not to write, then this exam, she was destined not to, as stated in the letter from 10 years later, steadily rank at the top of the class, as she always did. The girl's pupils dilated slightly, and she suddenly realized the future is not immutable. Just like how she already knew the true face of Xiaoru, there seemed to be a crack in the space between 16-year-old Qiaoqi and 26-year-old Qiaoqi. The 26-year-old Qiaoqi was the product of billions of choices made by 16-year-old Qiaoqi. Once there was a change, would it create a butterfly effect, affecting her, or even causing her to disappear? The girl trembled violently, feeling her vision blur. Her desk mate suddenly put down his pen. "Teacher, Qiaoqi isn't feeling well." "Thank you, Jiangxi." Lying in the soft bed of the health room, Qiaoqi closed her eyes. The boy saw that she seemed to be asleep, gently tucked the blanket around her, then blushed slightly, and silently left the room. Did the exam go smoothly? On the way home from school, Xiaomingzhi pushed his bike and turned to ask Qiaoqi gently. The girl moved her lips slightly. That's good." She lowered her head, feeling embarrassed. She didn't want to disappoint him, so she told such a big lie. But how could she confess? Tell him that she received a letter from her future self 10 years later? Say that she was worried her future self would disappear? Say that the 26-year-old Qiaoqi's biggest regret was meeting him? She couldn't speak, so she remained silent. "Qiaoqi." A distant voice came, and Xiaomingzhi turned his head. A boy with tousled hair, glasses perched on a face with symmetrical features, ran over panting. He leaned against his knees, breathing heavily, and looked at Qiaoqi with a caring warmth in his eyes. "Hello, are you Qiaoqi's classmate?" Xiaomingzhi asked politely. The boy's face suddenly turned red. Yeah, I'm Jiangxi." Xiaomingzhi suddenly realized it was that 11. He turned to look at Qiaoqi, who was looking a bit pale, but heard Jiangxi ask anxiously, Are you okay now?" The girl simply said, "I'm fine, goodbye," then grabbed Xiaomingzhi's arm and walked away without looking back. That appearance was so familiar to him. When she broke his ship model, when she didn't do well on the test and begged him to imitate her father's signature, it was all the same. He knew that's called guilt. "Xiaoqi, it's impolite to be like this," Xiaomingzhi said softly. Xiaoqi looked up, her expression momentarily fragile, like a sharp arrow piercing into the boy's heart. "Do you think the future determined by the countless choices we make can be changed?" The boy paused for a moment, stopping in his tracks. He looked at the girl's pale cheeks and suddenly said something irrelevant. "Tomorrow is Saturday, Xiaoqi, are you free?" The nearby cinema was showing a seemingly obscure film, Interstellar. By Saturday evening, the large IMAX hall was already packed with people. Xiaomingzhi, dressed in a white t-shirt and light plaid shirt, holding cola and popcorn, stood among the crowd, shining brightly, youthful and full of vigor. Xiaoqi subconsciously adjusted her bangs and walked over step by step. The white skirt fluttered against her thighs, echoing the rhythm of her heartbeat. It was an excellent film, with some understanding time and black holes, while others seeing deep father-daughter bonds. As the film began at a slow pace, Xiaoqi stole a glance at the handsome profile of the young man beside her. But as the plot unfolded, she couldn't spare any more attention to him, her eyes glued to the gigantic 22-meter wide, 16-meter high screen. Stripping away the scientific veil, it was indeed a simple story of family love. Cooper, the father, manipulated time and went back in time, using Morse code to hint at his daughter Murph to change her destiny, all for her to survive. Just like the 26-year-old Xiaoqi, sending a letter from the future, 10 years back. With great kindness and hope, the 26-year-old Xiaoqi, then shouldn't the 16-year-old Xiaoqi stop fretting and truly change her future? After the movie ended, she remained silent in her seat. Xiaomingzhi sat quietly beside her, softly asking, "Xiaoqi, what are you thinking?" She replied, "Regardless of whether the future can be changed or not, I want to change, as long as it's for the better." A faint sense of relief flashed in the boy's eyes as he reached out to ruffle the girl's hair, smiling faintly. The quiet end of autumn marked the beginning of the Winter Sports Festival. This was one of the students' favorite days, no classes, no uniforms, and a chance to see a different side of others, a more wild side than usual. Xiaoqi stepped out of the homeroom teacher's office and stood by the window in the corridor, gazing at the sun-drenched playground where some were running and others were playing sports. Just as mentioned in the letter, no one in the class signed up for the women's 2,000-meter race this time, so the teacher called her over. "You have long legs, good physical fitness, and you're also the class monitor," the homeroom teacher said. "You should set an example." "Don't be a role model," the 26-year-old Xiaoqi said in the letter. "Only you know that you're not good at breathing, and you get short of breath after running 500 meters. She didn't elaborate on the details of this sports festival, only saying, "It was one of the most embarrassing and brutal memories of my teenage years." So, Xiaoqi gathered all her courage and refused. "I'm sorry, teacher. I really can't do it." In the disappointment evident in the homeroom teacher's eyes, she backed out. Though her cheeks were burning, she felt incredibly relieved. In English class, the homeroom teacher, with a heavy heart, conducted an ideological education session on collective honor, ending with a question. "Who is willing to participate in the women's 2,000-meter race? You don't have to come first, just do your best." The class fell silent, with many eyes on Xiaoqi. The girl kept her head down, biting her lips slightly. Suddenly, a boy beside her stood up abruptly. "Teacher, I'd like to recommend someone." Xiaoqi was taken aback. Her gaze swept past her desk mate, then past Xiaoru's face with a look of anticipation. She was about to organize her refusal, but heard her desk mate say, "Every day after the last morning class, I see a classmate running from the classroom to the rooftop. She's fast, with good endurance. I'd like to recommend this classmate, Fan Xiaoru." Xiaoqi was momentarily stunned, unable to react. The classmates immediately started chattering. "She's always the leader in PE class long-distance runs." When it's her turn for after-school duty, she runs the fastest. The homeroom teacher coughed. "Fan Xiaoru, are you willing to bring honor to the class?" Xiaoru stood up with a pale face, nodding slowly. The desk mate sat back down, and Xiao Qi whispered a thank you. The boy's face flushed red again. On the day of the sports festival, Xiao Qi was stopped by Xiaoru in the classroom. The cheers of the cheerleading squad outside the window and the announcement on the loudspeaker, "The XX competition is about to begin. Please gather at the gym," seemed distant. Xiaoru's face was sickly pale as she raised her voice. Did he do this because of your words?" Xiao Qi responded lightly. "Xiaoru, why do you hate me so much? Hate me enough to slander me behind my back?" As the announcement called for the gathering of the women's 2,000-meter race participants, Xiaoru walked towards the door, sobbing. "Then why are you so outstanding? Why do you always make me the background?" She turned away, and there was a trace of blood on the white sports pants. Xiao Qi frowned slightly, vigorously patting her forehead with her hand. Well, the only thing worth celebrating now is that she was wearing running shoes today. Fate is perhaps changeable, but it's stubborn and unwilling to be easily altered. Xiao Qi thought as she ran steadily along the track. The habitual pain in her lower right rib area reminded her to adjust her breathing. Unconsciously, her mind recalled the scene from earlier. At the starting point, Xiaoru was preparing among the crowd. Some girls noticed the bloodstains on her pants and whispered to each other. Confused, Xiaoru looked around anxiously, but then someone draped a large sports jacket over her shoulders. "Jiangxi, take her away." Xiao Qi waved her hand like a queen. Xiaoru suddenly realized, her face flushing. "Xiao Qi, I don't need your help." "I'm not helping you," she said, rolling up her sleeves to warm up. "I just want to prove to you that I'm not good at everything." Indeed, she wasn't outstanding. It was extremely difficult for her to reach the finish line among the last group. The applause and cheers belonged to the first and second place winners. Only Jiangxi reached out and helped her. "Take a few steps," he said, and Xiao Qi wanted to curse at him to take a break. But deep down, she knew he meant well, so she walked slowly, thanking him for his jacket and for running the last few laps with her. The boy's face turned slightly red as he murmured yeah, and then became somewhat flustered when the girl asked about Xiaomingzhi, the boy who picks you up after school. He didn't come. Xiao Qi furrowed her brow. After deciding to help Xiaoru run the 2,000 meters, she had called Xiaomingzhi, and he had promised to come. They had known each other for 10 years, and this was the first time he had stood her up. A profound sense of sadness surged in her chest. In her most difficult moments, he had always been there for her, but not today. The line from the letter, "Until today, my greatest regret is why I met Xiaomingzhi," struck her heart like a curse. What kind of emotions did the future her have when she said this? And what terrible thing happened? 26-year-old Xiao Qi, please answer me. The white letter paper piled up thickly in the drawer, and Xiao Qi closed the drawer, pulled out the key, and walked quickly outside. 3 years of time, tempered under the guidance of 26-year-old Xiao Qi, accumulated into who she was today, bit by bit. With excellent grades, a positive attitude, great popularity, and a reputation admired by everyone, she was admitted to Ji University, where Xiaomingzhi also studied. At 19, Xiao Qi retained the innocence of her youth, but also displayed a remarkably mature side. Like a newly blossomed flower, she had graceful stems and souls that weathered storms. Xiaoru had been avoiding her for a long time. Although there were a few times Xiao Qi wanted to initiate a conversation with her, they all ended in failure. She knew it was the pride of a young girl, so she gave up and treated her as an acquaintance. But even with just a nodding acquaintance, she walked up to her desk after the college entrance examination and took a deep breath. "I have something to tell you." Xiaoru's words were short, but greatly unexpected to Xiao Qi. She said, "The boy who picks you up after school, you better stay away from him." After Xiaoru finished speaking and saw Xiao Qi's confusion, she turned and walked away. Suddenly, a force pulled her back. On the rooftop of the teaching building, the wind was fierce, but the sunlight was incredibly bright. Xiaoqi stretched lazily with her hands raised, recalling the scene of herself eavesdropping in the dark all those years ago. Regardless of Xiaoru's inappropriate actions, she wasn't blameless either. Despite being good friends, she didn't have the courage to go up and ask why. Now, she didn't want any misunderstandings, so she asked. As Xiaoru touched the railing of the rooftop and looked at the shadows of her fingers in the sunlight, she asked back, "Why did you bring me here?" Because the rooftop was Xiaoru's most relaxed and unpretentious place, and it was the starting point of all their conflicts. "Xiaoqi," Xiaoru paused, lowering her voice, "I did talk badly about you here. But at that time, I was alone. I didn't say anything to others." Alone. So she had never heard the voice of a second person. Alone. So she didn't really deceive her. A sour feeling filled her chest, blurring Xiaoqi's vision. Xiaoru smiled bitterly. "I'm not trying to reconcile our friendship or anything. I just hope you stay away from that boy. He's not a good person. He asked me if I wanted to be his girlfriend." Xiaomingzhi, not a good person. Two contradictory words, but they were so certain and clear on Xiaoru's lips. For a moment, Xiaoqi almost believed. But she couldn't. He was Xiaomingzhi, the boy who grew up with her, protected her, and accepted her. How could he easily look at other girls, especially the one she clearly didn't get along with? Another voice in her heart reminded her, why couldn't he? Since sophomore year, he had been gradually distancing himself from her. Besides, he was the person 26-year-old Xiaoqi regretted meeting the most. Feeling lost and confused, she walked down from the rooftop, unaware that her actions were being observed by others. Jiangxi's seat was right next to the outermost glass window, where he could easily see the teaching building and the connected corridor on the other side. Half an hour ago, when the school ended, he was about to leave after packing his bag, but he happened to see Xiaoqi pulling Xiaoru out. He wanted to follow but felt it wasn't appropriate, so he sat in the classroom bathed in the sunset, reciting English while waiting. Until now. Xiaoqi appeared alone, her steps slightly faltering. Without much thought, Jiangxi pushed his chair back and stood up, running out of the classroom bathed in the sunset. Panting, he stood in front of the girl and asked softly, "Are you okay?" The girl looked up. The boy in front of her had short black hair that stood out against his handsome face. His black-rimmed glasses had been replaced by contact lenses, revealing a pair of bright, phoenix-like eyes. The boy called 11, who blushed easily and was once her desk mate, had grown into a shining and outstanding young man. He resembled the Xiaomingzhi she used to admire. Xiaoqi didn't realize she had been trembling, but Jiangxi's internal string named restraint finally snapped. He reached out, gently but unquestionably placed his hand on the girl's shoulder, pulling her closer to his chest. He said, "Don't be sad, you're doing great." It was a clumsy comfort, but it touched Xiaoqi's tears. She wasn't the Xiaoqi who was 26 years old and had many regrets anymore, but her abilities were still so limited. She could change herself, but she couldn't change Xiaomingzhi's fate of leaving. "You're doing great. You've become great. But he's not someone you can change just by trying hard." The last letter Xiaoqi received in college, she opened it eagerly. 19-year-old Xiaoqi. Excellent letter opener. My hands are trembling as I write this letter. Perhaps it's because of the encounter at the cafe today. Can you guess who it was? If you answered Xiaomingzhi, then, dear me from 10 years ago, you haven't changed after all, and you're still going to be heartbroken. Yes, Xiaomingzhi. I will always remember when he moved next door at the age of 6, carrying the delicious cranberry pastries made by Aunt Xia, smiling and calling out, "Xiaoqi, come eat." I will always remember in high school when he picked me up after school, silently walking on the side with the traffic. I will also always remember, at the end of freshman year in college, the heart-wrenching feeling when I found out he was with Xiaoru. Xiaoru knew all my secrets, knew that Xiaomingzhi was the most important person in my life. She confessed to him, and he actually agreed. If I could indulge myself and believe that I still held a place in Aja's heart, then I could only explain their love with the words, true love. True love is invincible, Even if a princess stands in the way, she will become a hated witch. But it's not. 6 months later, they broke up. Xiao Ru is still single to this day, and Xiaomingzhi quickly found a new girlfriend. You probably don't believe it, and neither do I. But today, I saw him cuddling with a beautiful girl, not anyone I've ever seen before. Watching his still warm smile, listening to him chatter about how well he's doing, I maintained a polite smile, but my heart felt like it had been torn open. It had been empty for a long time, and now it felt like it had been torn open again. I didn't know before, but the discomfort can reach a limit, and then it can get even more uncomfortable. Fortunately, my husband soon arrived and took my hand. His palm was warm, dispelling the coldness in my heart. At this moment, as I write this letter, I have no other expectations. I just want to say to you, don't be sad, my 19-year-old self. A person doesn't step into the same river twice. I hope you'll be stronger than me. P.S. This is my last letter. I've done what I can to guide you. I've done what I can to help you. I believe that 19-year-old Xiaoqi will live better, more exciting, and with no regrets than me. Remember, you're not alone. I'm watching you forever. Forever. Perhaps through a telepathic connection, as Xiaoqi read the end of the letter, she couldn't help but feel a flutter in her heart. Unspeakable pain and bitterness exploded in her chest. She was gone, and after Xiaomingzhi left, she lost another person who had accompanied her growth. But fortunately, she hadn't disappeared. Even though the 19-year-old Xiaoqi and the 26-year-old Xiaoqi would always be two parallel lines facing each other, being able to face each other was probably a kind of happiness. She wasn't alone. Suddenly, a call from her college roommate came in, informing her that the venue for this afternoon's physics elective class had been changed. After the roommate finished informing her, she couldn't help but joke, "Xiaoqi, you're a flower of the Chinese department. Why would you choose to endure the wind and rain by taking classes in the physics department?" Xiaoqi thanked her with a smile and hung up the phone. The topic of today's physics elective class was parallel universes. Some say that different parallel universes may exist within the same spatial system, but with different time systems. Although sometimes, through some accidental events, two universes can perceive each other's existence, but generally speaking, they remain sounds of chickens and dogs heard from afar and a lifetime of separation. I only hope that in another parallel universe, you can forget the regrets and be very happy. Because of the last letter, when Xiaoqi saw Xiaomingzhi's girlfriend at the student union, she didn't react too strongly. The girl was beautiful, but when she saw Xiaoqi and Xiaomingzhi greet each other so familiarly, she pretended to accidentally step hard on Xiaoqi's foot. Xiaoqi was completely unprepared and let out a low hiss. Xiaomingzhi glanced at her and gently rubbed his girlfriend's long hair. Naughty. Xiaoqi, are you okay? Xiaoqi shook her head slightly as she looked at him. Just then, Jiangxi walked in from outside with a flushed face, his eyes staring straight at Xiaomingzhi's girlfriend. It wasn't the blushing cheeks of love at first sight. It looked more like a big anger. Xiaoqi's heart softened. No matter how she changed, Jiangxi's protective nature towards her had never changed. Xiaomingzhi sat down and introduced, Xiaoqi, this is my little sister who grew up with me since childhood. She's a freshman in the Chinese department this year and is responsible for the student union's external affairs. Jiangxi, also a graduate of Jihai, is a freshman in the economics department and is in charge of the student union's finances. He said with a smile, they're called 7-11 when they're together. One is 7, the other 11. Xiaoqi lowered her eyelashes and raised the corners of her mouth in the slightly awkward laughter of everyone. She didn't feel anything special, but Jiangxi's face turned red, and his eyes, which had been staring, shifted from Xiaomingzhi's girlfriend to Xiaomingzhi's face. Blushing while glaring, Xiaoqi thought he had improved. After the meeting ended, Xiaoqi walked back to the dormitory under the setting sun. At the corner leading to the girls' dormitory, she unexpectedly encountered Xiaomingzhi and his girlfriend talking. Xiaomingzhi, with his already sharp and angular face, wore a warm but distant smile and said gently, Xiaojing, let's break up. I don't like it when someone bullies Qiaoqi. It's like bullying me. He didn't see Qiaoqi behind him, just as he didn't see the tears welling up in his girlfriend's eyes as she closed them. Xiaomingzhi patted Xiaojing's shoulder and walked away. Xiaojing opened her eyes again, glaring at Qiaoqi coming towards her. Are you satisfied now? Qiaoqi didn't answer. She just walked away. His defense moved her, but no longer made her heart flutter. Let's just be the memories we both cherish, as close as siblings, and as calm as water. If that's what you wanted. As the discomfort surged through her body, her heart seemed to be injected with a new force, filled with a newfound joy and peace. Because there was someone watching her, encouraging her to be strong. No, not just one, but two. I always remember, when I just entered high school, I forgot to bring money at noon and didn't dare to go to the cafeteria. Later, you found out, but it was already past lunchtime. You insisted on taking me out for a meal. Jiangxi's eyes twinkled slightly. From that moment on, I've been watching you. Watching as Xiaoru says one thing to your face and another behind your back. I was anxious, but didn't know how to help you. So I worked hard to get into G University. Qiaoqi, I'll still be watching you. Always watching you. Qiaoqi smiled gently. For her, the warmest 3 words in the world were not, I love you, but watching you. Jiangxi's face blushed slightly, and Qiaoqi could see it, but she didn't see the slight redness in the boy's eyes. He carried such a heavy secret. He could watch her, but the other person never could again. In the autumn of her first year of high school, Qiaoqi experienced several significant events. Firstly, she became the class monitor. Secondly, Xiaomingzhi got into college and picked her up after school. Thirdly, she received a letter from herself 10 years later, written when she was 26. That autumn, the only significant event in Xiaomingzhi's life was being diagnosed with liver cancer. In the best-case scenario, he had only about 5 years left to live. Without time for self-pity, he began preparing for the future. Unable to accompany the girl most important to him through life, he started writing letters to her in the voice of his 26-year-old self. Xiaomingzhi was skilled at imitating others' handwriting and understood Qiaoqi's personality, so the girl never suspected anything. To fulfill the contents of the letter, he approached the people around her, including Xiaoru and Jiangxi, using the opportunity to pick up Qiaoqi after school. He helped Qiaoqi grow while also helping her forget about him. Until one day, when he saw her show no sadness upon seeing his so-called girlfriend, he knew his task was complete. He accompanied his mother on a plane ride to a country with more advanced medical treatment for his final treatment, outwardly under the guise of studying abroad. Qiaoqi smiled as she saw him off, with Jiangxi standing beside her, shielding her from the strong wind. He waved goodbye with a smile, turned away, and tears streamed down his face. However, Xiaomingzhi had no regrets. Just as he wrote in his letter, "What I could guide you through, I have already done. What I could help you with has also ended. I believe the 19-year-old Qiaoqi will live a better, more splendid, and regret-free life than me. Remember, you are not alone. I am watching over you forever. Forever."